The beast broke free at 3:47 station. Time and Owen Clark was in the wrong corridor when it happened. The alarm did not sound. That was the first bad sign. The second was the smell, something ancient and hot and metallic pushing through the ventilation shafts of research station Keth Dar like a warning no one had written a word for. Yet, Owen was 17 hours into a 40-hour data analysis shift when the lights dropped to emergency amber. His workstation screen flickered. The feed from the lower containment deck went black. He grabbed his access card and stood up. The door to his research bay opened. Before he touched it, the corridor was empty. That was wrong. At 3:47, even on a quiet rotation, there were maintenance staff, security, patrol, the night shift xenobiologist, shuffling between labs. The corridor should have had people in it. It had smoke instead, thin and gray, drifting from the direction of sub-level 4. Owen moved toward the emergency assembly point on level 2. He had rehearsed this. Every exchange student on Keth Dar rehearsed this during orientation week. Turn left at the biology hub, right at the atmospheric processors, the green door at the end of the passage. He turned left. The green door was already sealed. The override panel beside it blinked red. He turned back. 3 raiders stood at the far end of the corridor. They were not station staff. The armor was wrong, dark and unmarked, the kind worn by people who did not want their affiliation logged by security cameras. 2 of them carried suppression rods. The third carried something larger that Owen did not look at for long. He ran, not toward them, left again down a maintenance corridor he had walked exactly once during orientation and had mostly forgotten. The floor was ribbed metal. His footsteps were loud and he could not make them quiet, and he ran anyway. The maintenance corridor ended at a junction. Left was a storage bay. Right was the door to sublevel 4. The door to sublevel 4 was open. Not ajar, not malfunctioning. Open. The lock housing blown outward from the inside. The metal peeled back like something had decided the door was an inconvenience and removed it. Accordingly, Owen stopped at the junction. Behind him, boots on ribbed metal getting louder. He went through the open door. Sublevel 4 was the containment research floor. Owen had never been cleared for it. His exchange program covered atmospheric chemistry and xenobiological data logging, nothing that required access to the beings held in the lower cells. He had heard about them the way everyone on the station had heard about them, carefully in pieces with the particular tone people use when they are being accurate and hoping accuracy will substitute for comfort. The Vorek in Cell 9 had been on Keth Dar for 14 months. It had arrived sedated in a transport shell rated for Category 7 containment. The station's research lead had described it in a briefing Owen had not been invited to, but had later read the transcript of, because he read everything. She had called it the apex predator of the Q-Lith system. She had called it cognitively complex. She had called it in the final line of the briefing something the Galactic Union was still deciding what to do with. Cell 9 was empty. The containment door lay on the floor of the corridor in 2 pieces. Owen stood very still. The sound behind him, boots on ribbed metal, had stopped. He had not heard them stop. He became aware slowly of breathing that was not his own. It came from his left, low and even end. Enormous, he turned his head. The Vorak from Cell 9 stood 8 feet from him in the amber emergency light. It was larger than the briefing document had prepared him for, broader across the chest than most doorways on the station. 4 limbs on the ground, a 5th partially raised, not threatening. Owen's brain noted with the distant calm of a person who had used up their fear and was now just processing data. The hide was dark and textured, the eyes reflective and steady in the low light. It looked at him. He looked at it. Behind him, from the direction of the maintenance corridor, came the sound of the raiders moving again. One of them said something in a language Owen did not speak. Another laughed. The Vorak's head moved. Not toward Owen, past him toward the sound. Something changed in its posture, a shift so subtle Owen nearly missed it. And nearly dying from missing it would have been the least interesting way to die available to him that night. The raised limb lowered, the body settled. It was the posture of a creature that had just made a decision. It moved to the entrance of sublevel 4 and stood there, between Owen and the corridor. The first raider came through the blown door at speed, rod raised and stopped. Absolute stop, the kind produced by understanding that the information you had going in was missing a critical variable. The Vorak did not move. The raider took 1 step back. The Vorak still did not move. 2 more steps, then the raider was gone, and the sound of boots on ribbed metal was retreating now, fast and uneven, and somewhere above them an alarm finally, belatedly began to sound. Owen stood in sublevel 4 and breathed. The Vorak turned its head and looked at him. He did not know what it was looking for. He did not know what it found. He knew only that it turned back toward the corridor and stayed there, a wall of dark muscle and quiet intention, and that he was improbably still alive. He sat down on the floor of the containment deck, put Snorts' back against the wall, and tried to think. The alarm continued, the amber light continued, the Vorak continued its watch. Something, Owen thought, had decided he was worth the trouble. He had absolutely no idea what to do. With that, the alarm cycled through 3 tones and then went silent. That was worse than the alarm. Owen had been on Kethdar long enough to know the emergency protocols. 3 tones meant general alert, everyone to assembly points, non-essential personnel to evacuation pods, security to active response. Silence after 3 tones meant the emergency management system had encountered something it did not have a protocol for. He pulled up the station map on his personal unit. The display was partial. Some nodes offline, some feeds corrupted, but enough remained to read. The evacuation pods on level 2 had been launched, all of them. The assembly point he had been heading for was now on the wrong side of a sealed bulkhead. He was in the lower decks with a creature classified as a Category 7 containment requirement, and the exits were gone. Owen looked at the map for a long time. The Vorak had not moved from the entrance. It stood with its back to Owen, and its attention fixed on the corridor. And it had the specific stillness of a creature listening to things Owen could not hear. He made himself stand up. "Okay," he said to no one in particular. His voice came out steadier than he expected. "The research bay on this level has emergency communications. If the main array is down, the local transmitter might still work. He looked at the Vorarch's broad back. "I'm going to move," he said. It turned its head just enough to track him, then it moved. Not ahead of him, beside him, one step. To his left and slightly forward, the position a guard takes, Owen thought. Which was a thought he did not know what to do with yet, so he set it aside and moved. The research bay was 40 m down the sub-level corridor, in the amber. Emergency light with smoke still drifting from the vents and silence pressing in from all sides. 40 m felt considerably longer. Owen moved a pace. The Vorarch matched him without appearing to hurry, which was its own unsettling kind of efficiency. 3 doors down, a section of ceiling panel had collapsed, the debris blocked half the corridor. Owen started climbing over it and felt the Vorarch's attention shift before he heard anything, a subtle change in the quality of its stillness, like a frequency dropping below what could be named. He stopped climbing. 2 raiders came around the far corner. They saw Owen first, then they saw what was beside Owen, and the change in them was immediate and total. The forward momentum went out of them like something had pulled a plug. The Vorarch did not make a sound. It did not advance. It simply oriented toward them with the absolute focus of a creature that had been at the top of its food chain for longer than Keth'Dar had existed. One raider pulled the other back around the corner. Owen finished climbing over the debris. "Thank you," he said, and felt slightly foolish saying it, and said it anyway, because it was accurate. In the station's secondary monitoring hub on level 3, Dr. Claire Holt was watching this on a cracked secondary screen and not blinking. She had been in the monitoring hub when the attack started, having pulled an unscheduled late shift to finish a behavioral analysis report. She had sealed the hub's internal lock when the first unauthorized entry alarm tripped, and she had been watching the station's partial camera feeds ever since, cataloging the disaster in the methodical way she cataloged everything. She had watched Cell 9's feed go offline. She had watched the breach alert for sub-level 4 trigger and then stop triggering because the sensor array had been damaged. She had found the one remaining functional camera on sub-level 4 by routing through a backup node that should not technically have still been working. She had been watching Owen Clark. She recognized him from the exchange program briefings, moving through the sub-level, with Subject 9 walking beside him like a very large, very calm escort. Subject 9, 14 months of behavioral study, 14 months of careful observation through reinforced containment glass of data logs and meal and stimulation protocols, and the slow, painstaking work of determining what kind of intelligence lived behind those reflective eyes. The primary conclusion of her behavioral analysis report, the one she had been finishing tonight, the one now sitting incomplete on her workstation, was that Subject 9 demonstrated no interspecies cooperative behavior under any observed conditions. Subject 9 had just checked corners for a human student. Claire opened a channel to the sub-level emergency comm and then closed it. If the raiders were monitoring station frequencies, she would be leading them directly to Owen. She studied the map overlay. The research bay was his best option. She Snorts had spare equipment there, including an emergency signal booster that could punch through the station's damaged array. She watched Subject 9 pause mid-corridor and raise its head. 2 seconds later, the raiders appeared. On the screen. She had not seen them on any camera feed. Prior to that moment, Subject 9 had sensed them before the camera had them. She sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for exactly 1 second. "Okay," she said to the empty monitoring hub. "Okay." She started routing backup power to the research bay's emergency comm. Owen reached the research bay and found the door sealed. The electronic lock had gone to emergency lockdown, which required a level 3 clearance card. His was level 2. He stood in front of the door and thought about this. The Vorak moved past him, examined the door for a moment that lasted approximately the time it takes to understand a problem, and then applied precise force to the lock housing. The door opened. "Right," Owen said. He went inside. The emergency comm unit was on the far wall behind a rack of specimen containers. Owen got to it in 12 seconds. The signal booster Claire had been routing power to activated just as Owen's fingers found the transmit switch. He opened the channel. "This is Owen Clark, Exchange Program. Research Station Keth Dar Sublevel 4. Station is under attack. Evacuation pods have launched. I need a response." He paused. "I'm not alone down here." He looked at the Vorak, which had positioned itself at the research bay entrance and was watching the corridor with the same unhurried attention it had given everything else tonight. "I don't think I'm in danger," he added, "but I'm not sure how to explain why." The comm crackled. No response yet. He left the channel open and sat down on an equipment case to wait. The Vorak did not move from the door. Outside, somewhere in the upper deck, something exploded. The station shuddered. The amber lights flickered. The Vorak's head moved, tracking the sound, calculating, then settled again. Owen watched it and thought about the 14 months of behavioral study he had never been clear to read. He thought he might have something to add to it if they got out of this alive. The raiders had sent a hunter unit. Owen figured this out when he heard the difference. The earlier groups had moved loudly. Boots and equipment, and the particular noise of people confident in their numbers. This was different. He heard it before the Vorak reacted, which told him something. The Vorak's reaction, 3 seconds after his own, told him he had not imagined it. Almost no footsteps. What he could hear was a careful, deliberate silence, the kind that cost effort, the kind produced by people specifically trained to move through enclosed spaces without being found. The Vorak moved away from the research bay entrance for the first time since they had arrived. It did not retreat inside. It moved into the corridor. Owen stood up. Every part of his common sense told him to stay in the research bay behind the partially broken door in the comparative safety of the corner, where 2 equipment racks formed a barrier. His common sense was correct. He stayed. He listened. What followed lasted 40 seconds and sounded nothing like what he expected. No roaring, no impact of bodies against walls, brief sharp sounds, a suppression rod discharge, the crack of something structural giving way, a short series of heavy movements, and then quiet. The Vorak came back through the research bay entrance. It was hurt. Owen saw it in the way it moved, the left front limb taking less weight, shoulder on that side carrying a burn mark across the hide where the Suppression rod had connected at close range. Not a wound that would stop it, but a wound. Owen looked at it, it looked at him. He crossed the room. "Let me see," he said. It did not move away. He had a field kit in his bag. Students on exchange programs carried them as part of orientation requirements. The kit was designed for human biology, which meant approximately 60% of it was irrelevant right now, and he had to think carefully about the other 40. He had taken xenobiological first aid as an elective in his second year. Professor Dale had called it a secondary qualification, and most of the class had treated it accordingly. Owen had found it genuinely interesting and paid attention anyway, which was the only reason the next few minutes went the way they did. He cleaned the burn with sterile solution. The compound was pH neutral, enough to be non-reactive across most carbon-based biology, which was the entire point of it, and the Vorak held absolutely still while he worked, not the stillness of tolerance, something that felt, Owen thought, like trust, though he was careful about the word, because it was doing a lot of work in a situation he did not fully understand. The wound was significant but not deep. The suppression rod had grazed rather than made full contact. Owen applied the tissue sealant, also pH neutral, also rated for cross-species emergency use, and then sat back on his heels and assessed what he had done and whether it had helped. The Vorak lowered its head and looked at the treated wound. Then it looked at Owen. "You're welcome," Owen said. Something shifted in the Vorak's posture. He could not name it. He filed it away. In the monitoring hub, Claire watched this on her cracked screen with her hand pressed over her mouth. She had seen Subject 9 take a suppression rod strike. She had watched the Hunter unit, 4 of them specialized, exactly the kind you hired when you wanted live specimens, recovered intact, encounter Subject 9 in the corridor, and she had watched 4 become 0 in 40 seconds. And she was going to think about that carefully later when she had the capacity for it. Right now she was watching Owen Clark apply tissue sealant to an apex predator's shoulder wound while the apex predator held perfectly still, and she felt a specific feeling she did not immediately have language for. It was the feeling of watching something that was not supposed to be possible happening anyway. She had spent 14 months studying Subject 9. She had documented its feeding behavior, its sleep cycles, its responses to stimuli. She had recorded its interaction data with every researcher who had approached, its containment, wary tolerance for some, active discomfort displayed toward others, and for 3 staff members who had approached with particular carelessness, a response so immediate and absolute that the containment protocols had been revised afterward. Subject 9 had never, in 14 months, allowed physical contact from any station personnel without sedation. Owen Clark had walked up to it in an emergency amber corridor, said, "Let me see," and treated a suppression rod burn. She opened the comm channel. "Owen, it's Dr. Holt from Xenobiology. I can see you on the remaining cameras." A pause. "I'm not alarmed," Owen's voice came back, relatively speaking. "The Hunter unit you encountered was one of 3 that came aboard with the Raider group. The other 2 are in the upper decks. There may be more standard personnel between you and the command center." She pulled up the schematic. "Your friend cleared a path to the maintenance lift about 60 m from your Current position if the lift is still. Functional. We'll check, Owen said. She noticed the word not I, we. Be careful, she said. We'll try, Owen said. The maintenance lift was functional. Owen found it exactly where the station map said it was, which was the first thing that had gone according to plan. All night, the Dvorak examined the lift with what Owen had begun to read as professional skepticism, a thorough assessment of dimensions, structural integrity, and probable load capacity before stepping inside. Owen followed. The door closed. He pressed level 1. The lift moved. He stood beside the Dvorak in the confined space and said nothing because there was nothing that needed saying. Right now, the wound was treated and holding the lift was moving. 11 minutes was not far. The Dvorak turned its head and looked at him. We're going to be fine, Owen said, because it was what he believed and also because saying it out loud made it easier to keep believing. The lift reached level 1. The door opened. Aaron Webb was crouching in the corridor with a security rifle, and for 2 seconds that lasted considerably longer than 2 seconds, everyone held very still and assessed the situation. Don't shoot, Owen said. Aaron Webb had been a station security officer for 6 years. He had handled equipment malfunctions, medical emergencies, one attempted theft of research specimens, and the specific bureaucratic effort of processing Category 7 containment arrival. He had run through the emergency protocols so many times that they were automatic, which was why he had made it from level 2 to level 1 through maintenance crawl space while the raiders controlled the main corridors. He had not run through a protocol that covered a maintenance lift opening to reveal a human student and an uncontained Dvorak standing side by side. Don't shoot, the student said. Webb did not shoot. He also did not lower the rifle because 6 years had given him good instincts, and the instinct said hold. My name is Owen Clark. I'm in the exchange program, atmospheric chemistry. The Dvorak has been protecting me since sub-level 4. I need to reach the command center. Webb looked at the Dvorak. The Dvorak looked at Webb. It's not going to hurt you, Owen said. He paused. I'm fairly confident. Fairly, Webb said. I treated a wound about 10 minutes ago. We've been working together since the breach. Webb looked at the Dvorak's shoulder. The fresh sealant was visible. He looked at the Dvorak's face, the kind of face that gave nothing away by design, and then he looked at Owen, who appeared calm in the specific way of a person who had arrived at calm through necessity rather than nature and was holding on to it. Deliberately, he lowered the rifle halfway. The command center is on level 1. North section, Webb said. 2. Confirmed raider groups between here and there, may be a third, I don't know where. Their leader is. Dr. Holt is monitoring on whatever cameras are still working, Owen said. She's been guiding us. Webb processed this. Claire Holt had been in the monitoring hub when this started. That was useful. Does she have eyes on the north corridor? Owen opened the comm. Dr. Holt, we found security staff. What can you see between us and the command center? Claire's voice came back immediately. One group of 4 in the main north corridor. There's a parallel maintenance passage. I'm sending the route to your unit now. Owen's unit beeped. He showed the screen to Webb. Webb looked at the route, looked at the Dvorak. It'll be tight in the maintenance passage. The Vorak looked at the passage entrance, at the end of the corridor, then looked back at Webb, an expression Webb could not categorize and did not try to. "It'll manage," Owen said. The maintenance passage was tight. The Vorak managed. Webb went first, rifle up, moving with the controlled efficiency of years of training. Owen went second. The Vorak came third, moving with its left shoulder turned slightly inward, against the wall, adjusting for the confined space with an awareness of its own dimensions that Webb found, despite himself, impressive. They moved in silence. At the junction point, Webb raised a fist and stopped. Everyone stopped. He listened. Raiders in the north corridor, he could hear them, equipment and voices in the kind of conversation that happens when a group is confident and bored, 4 of them, as Claire had said. He turned to Owen and held up 4 fingers. Owen nodded. The Vorak moved forward, not past Webb. Beside him at the maintenance passage grate that opened onto the north corridor, it examined the grate. It examined the corridor beyond. The raiders had not noticed. The grate was at floor level and partially obscured by a support beam. Then it looked at Webb. Webb had spent 6 years reading body language across a dozen species. He was not always right, and he knew it, but he had learned to trust a clear reading when one came. This was clear. The Vorak was asking him something. Webb looked at Owen. Owen looked at the Vorak. "We need to get past them, not through them. If we can avoid it, can you create a distraction?" The Vorak held his gaze for a moment. Then it moved back down the maintenance passage without sound, a thing that should not have been possible at its size, and Webb watched it go in quietly. Revised several things he thought he understood about this species. 20 seconds later, something fell loudly in the section of maintenance passage that ran parallel to the south corridor. A metal panel hitting a floor. Deliberate, measured. The voices in the north corridor reacted. He heard them move south to investigate. Webb came through the grate. Owen followed. They crossed the north corridor in 8 seconds and reached the command center door. Webb entered his override code. The door opened. The Vorak was already there, coming through the opposite maintenance access on the far side of the command center. Webb stopped in the doorway. "It knows the station layout," Owen said from behind him. "It does," Webb said. 14 months, Owen said. It had 14 months to learn it. Webb had no response to that. He moved to the communications console. The command center was not empty. The Raider leader was at the station's data terminal copying files with his back to them. He heard the door. He turned. For a moment, nobody moved. He was not armed with a suppression rod. What he carried was larger, and he raised it with the practiced speed of someone who had been in exactly this situation before. The Vorak crossed 4M in a fraction of a second. The weapon discharged once and hit the ceiling, and that was the end of the Raider leader's participation in the night's events. Webb was already at the communications console. What Owen remembered later, when people asked him, and people asked him many times in many rooms with different insignia on the walls, was that the Vorak had not hesitated. There was no moment of assessment, no visible calculation of risk. The weapon came up and the Vorak simply moved. 4M. Gone before the discharge lit the ceiling. Owen had seen it and still could not describe it as a sequence of events. It was more like a decision that had already been made and was only now being expressed in physical space. No one was hurt. The Raider leader was not seriously hurt either, which was its own kind of statement. The Vorak had stopped him with the minimum necessary, and Owen filed that away next to everything else he was filing away for. Later, Webb's hands were already moving across the communications console. And GT snorts. And GT, the main array was offline. He had expected that, but the backup transmitter was intact. And Claire's power routing from the monitoring hub had kept it active. Channel open, he said, sending distress signal on primary band. Owen watched the signal go out, a single line on the transmission log, the time stamp read 501. The Galactic Union response fleet's listening post was 11 minutes away at emergency speed. Webb set the signal to continuous broadcast and straightened up. He looked at the Raider leader, who was sitting against the far wall looking at the Vorak with the expression of a person who had significantly revised his professional risk assessment. "He'll stay there," Owen said. Webb looked at him. "He's not going to move," Owen said. "Look at him." Webb looked. The Raider leader was not looking at anyone except the Vorak. And the look on his face was not aggression or strategy or calculation. It was the simple, flat look of a person who had encountered a variable he had not planned for and was now waiting for the situation to end. "Fair enough," Webb said. Claire Holt reached the command center. 12 minutes later, she had left the monitoring hub when the transmitter signal confirmed clear broadcast and made her way through the station using her own knowledge of which passages the Raiders were not using, a knowledge accumulated incidentally through years of late shifts and alternative paths between labs that most people took the main corridors for. She came through the command center door and stopped. Owen Clark was sitting on the floor near the communications console with his back against an equipment rack. The Vorak was beside him, not standing watch at the door, not oriented toward any threat. Beside him, its injured shoulder turned slightly toward Owen as if presenting the wound for checking. Owen had his field kit open. He was assessing the sealant. Claire stood in the doorway and watched this for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "I'm Dr. Holt." Owen looked up. "I know, thank you for the calm guidance. How is the shoulder?" She moved closer. Watching the Vorak watched her back, not with wariness, not with the careful tolerance it had displayed toward most researchers through 14 months of containment glass, something quieter than either. "Holding well," Owen said. "The sealant took cleanly. I'd want a proper scanner on it." "You'll have one." She paused. "The fleet response will have full medical capacity for both of you." Owen looked at the Vorak. The Vorak did not look at him in return this time, but something in its posture acknowledged the words, a small, barely perceptible settling that Claire's 14 months of behavioral study identified as received. She sat down on an equipment case and opened her data unit and started writing. The Galactic Union response fleet arrived in 11 minutes and 40 seconds, 40 seconds over the listening post. Estimated time later attributed to additional vessels being added to the response group after the signal came through. Not one ship for the senior officer who came through the Airlock was Commander Petra Lane, Galactic Union Fleet Division. She assessed the situation in the command center in under 2 minutes. The Raider leader secured the station structural status, logged the wounded station, personnel triaged, and then she stopped in front of Owen and the Vorak. She looked at Owen. Exchange program. Atmospheric chemistry, Owen said. Owen. Clark. She looked at the Vorak. The Vorak looked at her. Category 7 containment, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Owen said. Currently uncontained. Yes. Commander Lane looked at the Vorak for a long moment. The Vorak held her gaze with the same quality of attention. It gave everything, complete, unhurried, certain of itself. Did it protect you? She asked. Yes, Owen said. From the beginning, from the moment it got out, from the moment we encountered each other. Lane looked at her unit. She looked at Webb, who nodded once. She looked at Claire Holt, who was still writing on her data unit, and said, without looking up, I have 7 hours of footage and 40 minutes of direct observation. It protected him. I will have a full report to you within the day. Lane put her unit away. All right, she said in the tone of a person setting aside one category and looking for a better one. We'll work it out. The Galactic Union convened a formal review board 14 days later. Owen gave testimony. Claire Holt submitted her expanded behavioral analysis, the one she had been unable to finish on the night of the attack, now running to 43 pages. Aaron Webb submitted his security report, which was precise and accurate, and which contained in the final paragraph the line, Subject 9 demonstrated tactical awareness, interspecies coordination, and proportional threat response throughout the incident. Recommend review of containment classification. The review board was composed of 7 xenobiologists, 3 fleet officers, and 2 representatives from the species identification and ethics division. They reviewed the footage. They reviewed the testimony. They reviewed Claire Holt's 43 pages and asked her 17 questions. They asked Owen 6 questions. The 6th was the one that mattered. The board member who asked it was a senior xenobiologist named Dr. Callum Shore, and he leaned forward when he asked it and looked at Owen very directly. In your assessment, he said, why did Subject 9 protect you? You were not a known contact. You had no prior relationship. The breach gave it full freedom of movement through the station and beyond. It could have gone anywhere. Why did it stay with you? Owen thought about the amber corridor, the moment of looking and being looked at, the choice the Vorlag had made before Owen had said a single word or done a single thing, standing between him and the corridor without being asked, without hesitation, without any information Owen could identify as a sufficient reason. He thought about the field kit and the sealant and the maintenance lift and the maintenance passage and a metal panel dropped deliberately in a side corridor to draw 4 armed raiders away from a door. I don't know, he said. I don't think I did anything to earn it. Shore waited. Maybe that was the point, Owen said. Maybe it just decided I was worth it. The review board deliberated for 4 hours. The Vorlag's containment classification was suspended pending reevaluation. The grounds were demonstrated. Non-aggression toward non-threatening contact, demonstrated cooperative interspecies behavior, and demonstrated proportional response to threat across multiple hostile engagements. The reevaluation would take time, months. Possibly. The process existed for a reason, and the board respected the process. What the board did not enter into the formal record because it was not the kind of thing that fit neatly into formal records was the feeling in the room when Dr. Shore read the decision aloud, the quiet that came after the particular quality of it. It was the quality of people who had been looking at something they thought they understood and had been asked to look again and had looked again and found something larger than what they had been prepared for. Somewhere in the station's temporary holding facility, comfortable, open. Nothing like a containment cell, the Vorleg from Cell 9 lay on its side and slept. Outside the facility, in the corridor, Owen Clark sat in a chair with a data unit on his knee and wrote notes for the report his exchange program supervisor was expecting. The report was supposed to cover his findings in atmospheric chemistry. He was going to write about something else. The Vorax shifted in its sleep. Owen heard it through the wall. He kept writing,